Jacob, you are up next, sir.
Hey Bert, how's it going?
How's it going, Jacob? So you have a non-hand call, but it's more of a mechanic. It's not anything like with like something crazy happen, but just kind of something that we'd probably see in a fair. If you play a lot of PLO in pot limit games where there is a limit to the amount that you can bet on a street, you have probably seen this. The hand itself, like the exact hand itself, probably isn't all that important, but you can guide us through. So this is a double board PLO bomb pod, is that right?
Yeah, correct. It's in a 2-5 hold'em game with a 1K cap, 7 ways to a flop. Yes.
Okay. So you can just sort of tell us what happens. I'm not even going to put it up because the cards don't really make any difference. So if you can just summarize, like what, two guys, like one sort of whale and a pro get to, they get to the turn? Is that right? In their heads up?
Yeah, so how it kind of goes is, there's a big action guy in middle position, basically bets pod on a flop,
Mm-hmm.
and a button who I think is a PLO reg, actually.
Okay.
He calls.
Yep.
And so it goes to the turn, and basically, right when the turn comes out, the VIP instantly says all in. And a little backstory here. Unfortunately, the dealer, it was his first day dealing at all. So I don't think it helped out the situation.
Uh-huh.
So when he says all in, pot's 525, but he has about 1200 behind.
Okay. So the pot is 525 moving to the turn.
Yes.
So obviously he can only bet 525. The VIP says all in.
Correct.
Okay. So then what happens?
And the dealer puts the all in button in front of him.
Okay.
The PLO player on the button just instantly flicks in the one chip call.
So he says all in. Dealer puts the all in chip in front of him. The PLO reg flips in the one chip call. Okay. And then what happens?
And so at the table, there's kind of a brief discussion for maybe 10, 15 seconds because someone said, hey, the pot's not as much as your stack.
Before the river came out?
Yes, before the river comes out. Yeah.
So somebody chimes in and says, I don't know if that's right because he might have bet more than pot.
Correct.
Okay.
And the VIP is just saying, kind of, I bet it all. I want to go all in.
Uh-huh.
And the PLO guy is just kind of nodding, saying, yeah, sure, I call, which I've seen this before, but it's usually, if there's like 300 in the pot and somebody has 400 and pushes all in,
Right.
they just kind of agree that, sure, we'll go all in.
Uh-huh.
Yep. After the PLO guy kind of says, yeah, sure, I call, the dealer doesn't sort in the pot, I'll say. He just leaves the chips where they are. So they're still in front of each player, and he deals the river cards.
Okay. He deals the river card. Yep.
Yep. And so basically on the top board, the VIP had it locked up, but on the bottom board, the board pairs and he makes two boats and he instantly tables his hand.
So the VIP wins both boards
Yes.
in this double board game.
Yep. He flips his hand up. The PLO reg's kind of looking at it, kind of grumbling, saying, oh, I had the nuts straight on the bottom, but you rivered me.
Yep.
And he's looking at his cards and he doesn't muck. He just puts them down in front of him and says, okay, how much do I owe, as the dealer goes to take his stack.
Mm-hmm.
And so at this point, the VIP is kind of saying, oh, I have you covered, which he does. And
Right.
so he gets it all.
Yep.
And then the PLO guy says, whoa, hold on now. I only owe what's in the pot.
Ah. So this guy said all in on the turn. The dealer actually put the all in button in, which he shouldn't have said. The other guy said, okay, whatever, I call. I think this is very important. And then on the river, there is no discussion about any types of betting on the river, right? Did they just
No.
They just turn their hands over on the river, right?
Yep, the VIP turns his hand over. The PLO guy never actually turns his hand over. He looks at it and just puts it down in front of him, face down still, but does not muck it.
Yep. And now what happens?
And so now they're kind of getting into a disagreement because the VIP is saying, hey, no, I get all the chips. You called me.
Yep.
And the PLO guy's saying, no, you bet more than the pot. That can't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have to call the floor over.
Okay. And what does the floor say?
And so the floor, we kind of described the action to them. It takes a couple minutes, but the ultimate ruling is that you can only bet what's in the pot.
Okay.
So he takes 525 from each player.
Uh-huh.
He takes the 2 river cards and shuffles them back into the deck.
What? Wait a minute. Wait,
Yep.
he brought the action back to the turn for a bet that was over the size of the pot?
Yes, the ruling was that you can only bet the amount of the pot, and since there's still money left, there's still action,
Oh
and
my
therefore we
God.
have to redo the river.
Oh, first of all, that's the most insane, one of the more insane rulings I've ever heard. You would think that maybe the floor would rule that it's only the bet of 525 that is legal, and then the VIP guy wins both boards. But to bring the action back and then reshuffle the cards in and start the hand again from the turn is absolutely insane. So when they did that, when they brought it back to the turn, then what? The guy bet 525, and then what happened after that?
Yeah, so basically the floor is standing there, and he's making sure everything goes, according to his ruling. So they take in the 525 from each player, has the dealer take the rivers, shuffle them back into the deck, and says, okay, guys, so you'll still have the round of river betting. So dealer, please deal out the rivers. He puts down 2 new rivers. And then, the guys are just kind of looking at each other. The VIP's still in like shock, like, how did you just do that?
Wow.
And so he just checks, and the PLO guy, I think, kind of stunned, checks himself. And then the bottom board actually bricked out to where the PLO guy with his straight wins the bottom board now.
So they bring it back to the turn. The 525 is already in, forced to be put in the call. And now there's action on the river. It goes check, check, and now they chop it up, right? Because there's different rivers, right? So they chop it up and they chop it. Well,
yep.
I've never heard of anything like that for that resolution. I knew that was not something that was totally standard. And I think we can all agree with that. But I did want to discuss with Alan the Floor Man, now he's a character on the show, what I deem to be accepted action. And I saw somebody writing this in the live chat. And again, this is where I was going to talk about WSOP tournaments. So he says, in pot limit games, if action can be corrected on that street, it should be. Given the context of this conversation and that no one stopped either side, if I got called to the table, I'm ruling it that it is all in as accepted action. This is backed up by the TDA, that there is such a thing as accepted action. He goes on to say, I have no idea what was going on when taking the river cards back. That's just crazy. But accepted action is something that is certainly in the TDA. And where this comes into play with the TDA, and then I'm going to tell you a small anecdote at the end where I saw a huge angle like 20 years ago when I was doing commentary on Live at the Bike and I saw Daniel Negreanu tweeting about this a while back, maybe a month or two back. You'll see these guys now, when they're like moving all in a tournament, move their entire stack in, except for one chip. So they'll go all in and they'll leave one chip behind. And now, if you can picture this, the person in the blind or whoever is about to call them says call. And you might even have the dealer even throw in the all in button. But the guy has put all his chips in but one chip. So let's say that happens. And somebody calls, thinking that the guy's all in. And now the player who moved all in minus one chip loses. And now says, oh, I still have one chip. There is a rule with the TDA that says that chip, that one chip behind, can be deemed as accepted action if A bets all in and a hidden chip is found behind after a player calls. The TD will determine if the chip behind is a part of accepted action. I don't know when they put that rule in, but that is to prevent this. And the whole thing that Negreanu was saying in the whole conversation was, you pros, you guys are doing this. You guys are moving all your chips in except for one chip so that somebody makes like a mechanical mistake and says call and then like accidentally reveals their hand. And then you get to just fold out to save one chip. That's the whole point of why someone is doing this. So there is a rule called accepted action. I think it's a good rule. It should be a rule in cash games. I think it fits into exactly what you're talking about here in this particular situation. Because what ends up happening is the VIP gets free rolled against. I'll tell you something that I saw that was absolutely insane about 20 years ago. This was in No Limit. If people remember Corporation Mike from way back in the day, he was playing a pot against a guy. I think the guy was a plastic surgeon. This was probably back in 2006, okay? So they have, there's action on the flop. They have a big flop, and they get it all in, quote unquote, okay? Now, at that time, there was no all in buttons. So player A, he like makes a bet, and then I think I think player A made a bet. Let's say the stacks were like 6,000 effective. Player A made a bet of like 5,000, and Mike put the 5,000 in, thinking that it was all in. If you can kind of picture that, everyone thought that they were both all in. I don't know if it was bet or raise or whatever, but everybody thought they were both all in. When in fact, player A had only really bet 5,000, or he'd only put 5,000 in the middle as the bet. Mike calls it 5,000. This is on the flop. Now they have a discussion about whether or not they want to run it more than once. They decide to run it twice. Okay, so they run it twice. Now remember, you can only run it twice when you're both all in. They run it twice. They run 2 turns and 2 rivers with no betting action. And Mike wins both boards. And now player A says, well, I only owe you 5,000. I wasn't all in. You didn't put the extra 1,000 in. That is a great example of accepted action. No betting on turn or river, an action of running the board multiple times when the only time you can run the board multiple times is if you're all in. That's accepted action. Mike got burned by that guy for $1,000 because he assumed that everything was all in, and everything pointed to that also afterwards because there's no more betting. So you do have to protect yourself against this. And again, it's just something that looking at this situation, like in a tournament too, watch these guys that like try to put in like their entire stack and like leave one chip behind. I think the WSOP has all in buttons anyways, though, off the top of my head. But I think your situation here, Jacob, obviously the VIP guy he got fucked. I mean, where people are like, you know, what did people think at the table?
I mean, everybody, myself included, started to kind of chime in after, saying, you know, man, that's really messed up. That's an awful thing to do. Even if, you know, you just give them the 525 plus the pot, whatever was in there, that's kind of the right thing to do to make it right. And, you know, which from an etiquette perspective, I was going to ask your opinion. I think that's the only way to do it right. Even if you're not going to give them your whole stack, like that's kind of the bare minimum.
So to do what?
So to put the 525 in that the
yeah, that's the bare minimum. I mean, he should be that's I mean, I wasn't even getting to how crazy that ruling was. I was just talking, I mean, the fact that, I mean, that's insane, the fact that they brought it back. Nate in the live chat says, why is the VIP always getting burned in these scenarios? Stop chasing away the money. I agree. There's one other thing of note that I want to bring up here too, that I also asked Alan, that I was talking to Robin, who was playing a restricted buy-in game in hand 2. When we talked about accepted action, I played in a fairly restricted buy-in game at Commerce, 500 to 1,500, 510, no limit. There were people that were going north in that game all the time. What does north mean? North means they were coming over the table, or they table changed above what the cap was. At Commerce, at that time, I don't know if they've changed the rule, if you wanted to table change, not from a must move, but a table change, you had to bring your stack back down to the cap, because it's like you're moving to a new table. So if I had 5,000 over here and I wanted to table change, I had to bring it down to 1,500. Well, there were people that would start north of the cap or sneak chips onto the cap. And I always wondered about how that is supposed to be handled, because I've heard it handled many different ways. And I asked Alan, I said, what are your policies on someone going north in a cash game above the cap, and then when it's discovered in the middle of the hand? Is the fact that it was mentioned before the hand accepted action? The fact that it wasn't mentioned, before the hand accepted action. What I mean by that is that, let's say a guy goes north and then he plays a hand, like say he folds, and now in the next hand, he's north of the cap. And now all of a sudden it's discovered that this guy's got 2,500 instead of 1,500 and he gets all in. What is the resolution? And the majority of the time, what I have seen, and I don't know if there's a better way to really do this, is that if you don't bring it up before the hand that someone's above the cap, it is deemed as accepted action. You can't then go and say in the middle of the hand, this guy is above the cap. So there is precedent for this. But I thought the whole thing was kind of interesting. And again, I love the fact that floor men have this type of discretion, because I think that discretion, giving the floor men discretion, allows for someone to actually look at the individual situation and prevent angling. This resolution's insane that they brought it back to the turn and then dealt it out. I think that the VIP guy should really get all the money, right? Especially against a PLO reg. But I appreciate the call. Thank you very much, Jacob.